Hello there! Today we're talking all about Insta360's brand new flying 360 camera, the Insta360 Sphere. It helped me get this shot right here. I'm BobbyInBlue, and on this channel we talk about all things tech. If it's got lights or buttons, we're probably going to talk about it. So most of you know that I love 360 cameras and I love flying drones. The Insta360 Sphere is kind of like those two worlds crashing together. Not only that, but you can get some great shots that before now were pretty near impossible. The Sphere is a flying 360 camera, and the way that it flies is by clamping on to the DJI Air 2 or Air 2S. You can see that these lenses are very similar to their other 360 cameras, and the stitch line on this camera is a lot bigger than their other cameras. This allows for the drone to live inside of the stitch line between these two lenses, and that means when you're flying, it completely removes the drone from the image. Because the stitch line is quite a bit bigger than their other cameras, it also means that the distance that the person or subject is from the camera needs to be a little bit longer than it would on a traditional camera as well, to make sure that the image from this lens and from this lens can be stitched together properly. In most cases, it's not an issue for the stitch line to need a little bit more distance, because most of the time the drone will be flying high above most subjects. That being said, while I was trying out this flip around drone shot, you can see that the camera got a little too close to my face and ended up warping my face. So just know that the traditional distance that you need to be from the Insta360 Sphere is more than the One RS or the One X2. So you can create some really unique experiences with this 360 camera. If you're looking to export 360 videos, you can make it seem like your camera is just kind of flying through this environment and the camera removes itself from the image, and so you get this really crisp, clean image that allows you to look around in all different directions. Or if you're like me, I really like to shoot in 360, but I don't typically export in 360. I like to reframe my video so that I use a single shot from within that 360 sphere. The camera has a fixed 2.0 aperture, as well as a 35mm equivalent focal length, a 1050 mAh battery, with a life that lasts up to 48 minutes. I typically got somewhere around 34 to 38 minutes. The Sphere weighs 192 grams. It has a 5.7K 360 resolution at 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second, and it maxes out at 100 megabits per second. Higher frame rates are available at lower resolutions. The Sphere works with the DJI Air 2S or Air 2 drone. I've seen a couple people online try and use it with other drones, and it kind of ended in disaster. The Sphere has a USB-C port for charging as well as for data transfer, and it uses a micro SD card. When charging the battery, it takes around 100 minutes to charge. In many cases, the Insta360 Sphere is very similar to the One R or One RS, or the One X or One X2. And just like those cameras, you can connect the Sphere to the Insta360 app, which in my opinion is the most robust editing app amongst any of the 360 cameras. And the Sphere will act very similar to any of the other Insta360 cameras. In fact, in most cases, it's the same. When it comes to the hardware for the Sphere, you can tell that it's all built around optimization for weight. Everything that you do need to get a great shot, but nothing that you don't. Having the Sphere attached to your DJI Air 2S does affect the battery life of the drone. In all of my tests, I got somewhere between 15 and 20% less battery on each flight. The added weight does also make the drone a little less nimble. I liken this, probably the best analogy I can give you is like if you're driving a car, a small, nimble car versus a larger, heavier car. It still gets you where you want to go, but you can definitely tell a difference in the way they feel. Though 192 grams doesn't really seem like much in most circumstances, in the world of drones, that's quite a lot. The Sphere is built in such a way that it can attach to the DJI Air 2S without interrupting the GPS signal. In the past, when Insta360 has released a product similar to the Sphere, it had a bunch of problems getting in the way of the drone's ability to keep GPS connection. On the Sphere, I think that they have solved those problems. That being said, I did notice a couple of different things with it getting and keeping GPS signal. It didn't seem to affect my flight or the safety of my flight, but I did seem to notice that it took a little longer to find satellites sometimes, and or dropped in number sometimes as well. Though none of this really translated to anything that seemed to affect my flight. In the 20 plus flights that I've done with the Sphere, I haven't noticed it affecting the GPS in any way that was substantial. One of my favorite things about the Insta360 Sphere is that you can get some shots that in many other ways would be relatively impossible to get. You can maintain the framing on your subject, and you can get some shots that even an FPV drone would have a hard time getting. The cost of the Insta360 Sphere at the time of this recording was $430. Which is not bad considering the value that you can get out of some of the unique shots that you can get with this camera. That being said, if you don't already have a DJI Air 2 or Air 2S, then there's an additional cost to get the drone so that you can get those shots as well. Overall, the hardware for the Sphere you can tell has been optimized for weight and to fit around the drone. So there are a few opportunities with the hardware itself. It's not exactly the most robust when it comes to finishes or materials, and the SD card is not exactly easy to get in and out of the port. That being said, the name of the game with this camera wasn't ease of use or functionality or a great fit and finish. It was to fit on the drone and to make sure that it was as weightless as possible. On one side of the camera, you've got a spot for the brains of the camera, and on the other side, you've got a spot for the battery. And then of course, there's a lens on top and a lens below. That lens on the bottom of the drone does stick out further than the landing gear of the drone does, which means when you're landing or taking off, the drone kind of sets down and then kind of angles to the side. For this, Insta360 did include a nice soft feel mat so that you can put this down on the grass or the ground, and you can set the drone on it so that you don't get scratches on the lens when you're taking off or landing. I found the mat to not necessarily be the most ideal, and in most cases I prefer to just hold my drone for takeoff and then to catch it again when I'm landing. That being said, catching your drone or holding it when you're taking off is a skill set you definitely want to polish before adding the Sphere to your drone. It does make it a little bit more complicated to hold than your traditional grip that you would use to take off or to catch your drone. Like any 360 camera, it's important to make sure to take care of your lenses. They do come with these soft fill kind of gel covers. What I like to do is in most cases, I leave these covers on until the absolute last second before I take off, and that's the first thing that I put back on when I land. My Sphere did come with a couple of lens guards, though in most cases I prefer not to use them and to just take extra good care of my lenses. So what's inside the box for the Insta360 Sphere? You get the Sphere itself, you get a USB cable, you get lens guards, and you get a pad for taking off or landing. So my favorite thing about the Sphere is it can take some really hard shots and make them very easy to get. And also you can get some shots that really before a tool like this were almost impossible to get. The latitude to shoot whatever you'd like and then choose your framing with keyframes in the edit just makes for endless creative possibilities. You can use the Insta360 app or Studio app for the Mac or PC to pull up, reframe, keyframe, and export your images or videos. The thing that I really like the most about the desktop apps is it allows you to ease in and out of your keyframes and get some extra smooth movement between those keyframes. When I look at the engineering or the overall idea that is the Insta360 Sphere, it makes me just so excited. The creative options with this camera are just endless. I do think the camera does have some quirks. I would love to see an Insta360 Sphere with a higher resolution. I do think the hardware is maybe not necessarily the best ever, but it's optimized for weight, not necessarily for form factor. And then also there's just some small functionality things that are a little bit weird and robotic. Not being able to get to the SD card, the buttons kind of push a little weird. You're not sure if you've pushed them, if they're on or off. The status light is not necessarily in the best place, so you're not necessarily sure what's going on. That being said, all the opportunities that this camera has, the more I used the camera, the more that I got used to them and really kind of figured out how to use them, and I knew what to look for, and it didn't seem like it was a big deal at all. Have you had a chance to fly with the Insta360 Sphere yet? Let me know what your experience has been in the comments below. I really love 360 cameras, and the fact that we can have a flying one with the Insta360 Sphere is really great. I do think you can get some shots that in most ways or any other way that I can think of would be almost impossible, if not completely impossible. I'm BobbyInBlue, and on this channel we talk about all things tech. Thanks for watching the video. We'll see you in the next one.